again. On to our next keynote here with Kristi Cunningham, CTO at Kyndryl. Our title is Implementing AI Governance for Responsible Innovation. Hi Kristi, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really good, thanks. It's been a fantastic show so far. Lots of interaction from our audience as well. So less of me, more of you. The virtual floor is yours, and we'll come back with some questions at the end of your presentation.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and happy to be here with all of you today. As was mentioned, just a quick background today, I work for Kyndryl, who's an IT services firm. As the US CTO, I have a background in data and AI for a long time, technology, risk, so bringing it all together into the topic today of implementing AI governance for responsible innovation. Why is this so important today? Really because, AI is not something that's new. We've all been experimenting, implementing machine learning models, AI models for quite a while. But over the last couple of years, no surprise, it has really gotten heightened attention and some urgency for firms in really being able to implement and take advantage of generative AI with a couple years ago with the introduction of ChatGPT and the wealth of potential that it opened up. In particular, as many of you probably are aware, a lot of the use cases that we're seeing and areas that people are getting started is really in that productivity space, as well as employee and customer experience satisfaction. So a lot of ways in being able to do assist type of agents, improving productivity internally, moving away from a lot of manual tasks and improving those types of things. With it, though, while there's always been some considerations around AI and the governance of AI models, again, a lot more attention on how to manage risks, how to govern AI, and particularly generative AI. While you need to have a lot of the foundations in place, the infrastructure in place, and make sure that you have a secure environment, a private environment, and you have the right talent, these are all other considerations that are taken into account on your AI journey. A big part of it and focus for many firms and many clients that we work with is really how do you do this responsibly? So what are your guardrails? What are your policies and standards? How do you make sure you're being fair and being able to explain what you're doing? And that is really even harder to do, if you will, with some of the generative AI components. The other thing that's really driving, heightened awareness or focus on the governance components is we did a survey recently with a number of our CEOs, and 80% of them responded with saying that they wanted to have enterprise-wide AI in place in 2 years. That is a huge agenda ahead of many firms today to try to do that. And while that is the goal and how important it is, they also, on the reverse side, there was a lot of concern or lack of confidence, if you will, in having the things necessary, having the pieces in place to actually be able to achieve that goal in 2 years. A couple of the items are really around, do they have a plan for how they're going to get there? Do they have the skills? And of course, do they have the data that's available, quality of data. So all of those foundational components and the infrastructure in place as well. There's a side piece to this is that is a concern is while you need those foundations in place and all the plans, all the skills, all the data, there's also a culture change that goes with this, an organizational change in how you work, again, the talent components. So how do you bring all of that together and move your agenda forward, manage the risk while you're able to create these models, innovate fast? So one of the things that you need to start with is really thinking about the risks. We hear a lot about the risks, particularly around AI models, but then more recently, as I mentioned, generative AI types of models. we've all heard about it and see, bias in these models, worrying about hallucinations, data leakage. Is your environment protected, secure? Are you putting all of your customer data out in the cloud? So there's a lot of different risks that need to be thought about. And again, this kind of goes back into that culture as well, and building a risk mindset across the board in your business, in your model developers, your data scientists. So this is a key consideration for many firms, and being able to think about this broad range of risks and how do you assess the different use cases, so you can determine the value compared to the risk, and how you want to prioritize what use cases that you want to move forward. And what we're finding is, you need to really set up your framework. So thinking about those risks, thinking about what is your firm's point of view, and what is your risk tolerance, to be honest with you. What is the tone, and how are you going to position yourselves in this space for AI and generative AI? And one of the things that we're finding is, as you build this framework, a key to doing that is really having the top of the house engaged, and your senior leaders from all different domains, the business area, your security area, IT, legal, privacy, and really formulating what is that tone? What is it that's going to be the guardrails that we as an organization are going to operate within? Think of it as the parameters. What are we going to stay within? What are we going to operate within? And then within that, there's kind of a left side and a right side of this framework. The left side is a little bit more about where you have more people involved, and again, standing up those governance boards or steering committees, as I mentioned, that has that cross-cutting stakeholders involved in that. Within that framework, or within those guardrails, taking that a step further down, organizations are formulating and formalizing within policies what these guardrails.
Something went wrong. Please try again.
What these guardrails are. Sorry about that. And my phone is responding to me. What those guardrails are, as well as then setting specific standards. So a next level down that can guide the organization. Again, all of this is in context of helping the organization understand what your firm's posture is, positioning is, and then it will allow them, the rest of the organization, project teams, business areas within those guardrails, to be able to execute on business cases and use cases. On the right-hand side, you need to pair that with also tools that will allow you to monitor the environment, look for ways to ensure that there's compliance across the organization. So the teams are staying, the models are staying, the teams are staying within those guidelines that you've put out. So you're maintaining your risk positioning, your risk tolerance. And you also have some tools and technology in place that'll help you identify potential risks and can flag it and raise those issues. So it's not, you're using some of the technology yourself as a way to automate this and identify where you may have risks or issues are presenting themselves, so that you can address those and stay within, again, your policy guidelines, what you want as an organization from your risk tolerance standpoint. With all of that framework in place, then what does that do for you? Again, you have your cross-cutting steering committee, and we have the policies and standards that we talked about. We have the monitoring in place and the enforcement. And you can see how that kind of puts the two ends in place here. And you start to define your use cases. So each business area, or you do it it's not an or, it's probably an and. You have a set of use cases that you want to prioritize at the firm-wide level. These are things that are going to be most impactful cross business lines. But then you can also have some specific use cases that you look at. And again, this can be those agent bots, or it can be from a internal employee experience, it can be how do you do improve your HR policy responses. So you could have something like a chat bot to help answer questions about the vast range of HR policies that all of us have. So those are the types of things that you can look at from your business cases. And it's a good idea and best practice to try to create a roadmap if you can. And the way that you evaluate your use cases is both on a risk dimension as well as a value and implementation, ease of implementation kind of dimension. So you look at those to see what are you going to get as a return on your investment, but what is the risk level of this? So how high a risk is it? Is a lower risk? And then you may be able to, some of the lower risks, you may be able to have a fast path or a fast pass, if you will, through some of your governance. So the governing body doesn't necessarily have to review and approve every single use case. It can kind of be, self-serve and set up a model, which is a best practice we see as well, that you register your models, you do a self-assessment. And if you meet certain criteria, you fall underneath a threshold, keep on going. Others might have a quick review or a touch base, and then others that may be high risk, high touch, complex, need to go through further review boards to decision moving forward or not. And once you have that in place, you really are able to, then you can just enable your teams and your delivery teams, if you will. Think about it as your agile teams being able to then move forward. And what we're finding, again, is it's best to kind of take that iterative approach so that we're all learning in this space, particularly with generative AI. So creating, what is your MVP? Iterate on that, learn from what you're doing. There's a lot that we are still learning. Everybody's learning from what's the tools, the technology that you need, the infrastructure you need. There's a lot about is the data available, getting the right data, having it available, the quality of information that you need. That still is hugely important to what's going to be the output of your model. So, a lot of misinformation going in, again, presents risk that then you won't get the outcomes that you're expecting. So you'll need to do some testing, learning, refine your models to a point that you are ready to roll those out. And again, a best practice, as with many other things, is to do some, phased rollouts and pilots. So pick a small group of recipients of the model, users of the model, roll it out to them, and then scale up. And ongoing behind all of this is as you are doing your development as well as implementing these models and they're running on a regular basis, there's a whole enforcement and monitoring that's behind the scenes. So whether it's automated through some of the tools and technology that we talked about to check whether things are working appropriately, you're getting misinformation, anything like that, so that you can ensure compliance with the guardrails and the framework that you had in place. But the key here is creating, like I mentioned earlier, the framework, the guardrails. So if you get all of that in place, then you can allow faster innovation, quicker time to market, development of your use cases, and you can start to, as an organization, get more value out of automating, using AI, using generative AI along the way. So a couple of just key things, key takeaways for you from this that we have seen for success in being able to innovate responsibly. As I mentioned, I think it's really a speed for your organization and how fast can you accelerate adoption. Well, what we're finding comes from how much you have this message, and not just a message, but active engagement from the top of the house. So this is CEO, C-suite, board level down. We talked about the right policy, standards, guardrails, and appropriate oversight. That's critical to making sure you are managing the risks, safeguarding the organization, understanding what your position is in how you're going to use AI and the data that you're going to use within that. And understand that this is a transformation type of activity and adoption. There will be changes in how people work, how you need to work, what tools you're using. So engage the entire organization along on this journey. And it's not just communicate what's happening, but there's an education that goes along with this. Again, roles will change, new roles will get created. You'll be doing things a different way. So it's important to keep the organization not only informed, but brought along on the transformation as well. And again, creating another point that we talked about that's important is creating that culture of innovation, but also a risk management mindset across the board. I think it's important to have a couple key things in your culture, an innovative culture. So you test and learn and try things, but also within a risk mindset, as well as understanding key data management and quality components as well. So understanding what risk there is around the data. And then make sure that you are building all of those foundations. So the goal, as I mentioned again in the beginning, the goal of many of the CEOs is to be able to scale enterprise-wide in a couple years. We do know it's a journey. I think when we all started with our cloud journeys, it was the same kind of thing. Everybody wanted to be done in 6 months, a year, 2 years. Many firms are still on that journey, and it takes a number of years, 6, 7 plus. So think about how are you going to scale this and start planning for it from today, now, yesterday, and tomorrow. So what are the foundations that you need to have in place? And we talked about those a little bit earlier. And start, don't wait on that, though. You need to plan for it, build for it, but innovate along the way within the guardrails that you've set for your organization. So I hope this was helpful, and you'll be able to either get started or move, accelerate your journey into innovation with AI and doing so responsibly. So thank you all. Happy to open up for questions.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Yes, we are right up on time. So I'm going to have to do one very quick question for you if I can. And I'm so glad you brought up the question of culture, but in still encouraging innovation. What advice would you have? Because I know normally when hosting events such as this, one of the first hands that goes up saying, look, I want to have this culture, I want to try things, but the boss says, but the CEO has this mindset. How do you manage, what advice would you have for technical teams managing up here to encourage that downward understanding of the experimentation and the experimentation really that's needed for this to succeed? What would your advice be?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, that's where it starts, is at the top of the house. And I'll even take it up to the board level. So it's a bit of start with educating. So, helping them understand not just what it is, but the potential. That's what we spent a lot of time. I spent a lot of time on the first year, about 2 years ago, for about a year, was educating and the art of the possible. So get them excited, get them interested in, at the end of the day, what's going to be the bottom line for them? How is this going to change, and how is it going to add value to the organization? Once you get them excited, they will be the biggest advocate and champion, and they'll take it from there.
When the board's with you, it's amazing how quickly things happen. Who knew? Kristi, thank you so much. Always enjoy your insights and your presentations. Thank you so much for joining us here at Tech and AI Live New York.
Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
Take care.